Dreamweaver, Chapter 16, Departure. Priscilla stared at the waves. When she was a child, her father had taken her sailing. Out in the middle of the ocean, where there was nothing but the soporific susurration of the water and the carefree whistling of the wind, she would lose herself and blend as one with the world, joining schools of fish along the ocean floor or flocks of birds in the warm sky overhead with equal enthusiasm. Sometimes she imagined she was nothing more than a gust of wind, so light and infinitesimally small that she flew every which way, and caring for no matter where she was still home, always safe, always free. As she looked into the ocean, the water dyed black by night. A cold shudder ran along her spine. The waves continued to roll ashore and back, but their playful teasing now felt like a sinister beckoning, luring the unsuspecting into its folds. Priscilla tried to remember the last time she saw a boat, but couldn't. It had been too long, and she wondered whether the ocean was changed as much as the rest of the land. Everything that was great was in the past. The turbulent times of yesteryear seemed like man's golden age. She felt the same way about Terrenton. She had been proud once about how altruistic the people of the village were, banding together to make it a safe, habitable place. For a long time, she believed, as her father did, in sacrifices. Somewhere in the process, the struggle ceased. People became complacent with living like sheep awaiting slaughter, without questioning the reason, without seeking a solution. Sacrifices turned into ritual slaughters or offerings. It wasn't right. She sighed and took out her flute. Priscilla didn't know many tunes on it, but the few she knew from the center of her soul. The melody flowed effortlessly from her lips and swirled gracefully into the air. She finished and turned to Ainsley. I didn't know I had an audience. You're supposed to be at the guest house. He was sitting behind Eva, holding on to the girl in a loving embrace. If the wind had a voice, he smiled. Priscilla seated herself next to him. Do you play? Piano, he looked at her. But knowing how to listen is more important than knowing how to play. How true, she laughed. Do you bring her along everywhere? If I leave her, she dies, he said bluntly. Priscilla held his gaze searchingly. The man wasn't lying. What happened? Nothing that could be said in a word or two. She nodded understandingly. The world had grown too complex and strange. She's so beautiful. What's her name? Eva. Nice to meet you, Eva, Priscilla said, smiling and reached out to hold the girl's hand. It felt the same as before, soft but cold. Can she hear us? Ainsley thought for a while and then shook his head. But if she could, she'll be happy to know she's not alone. He laughed joyously. Priscilla was motionless and silent. It's not in our souls to be alone, she finally replied. That's why we are constantly seeking soulmates. The water reflected what little light that came through the sky, and they sat there for a long time in semi-darkness. A sudden pang of jealousy seized Priscilla as she glanced over at Eva, who should have all her sympathy. Ainsley wasn't talking, but the manner with which his eyes focused solely on the unconscious woman made Priscilla hurt, hollowing her out and excavating her soul. Who in the village would care about how she felt except her departed father? For the longest time, she had thought that Terrenton was the last of humanity, and that what was outside, beyond the beaches and deserts, were creatures of the wild and men who differed little from beasts. But before her was someone who was proof of the contrary, and evidence enough that worship of the Minakins was unnecessary. The villagers could go elsewhere and still find... She glanced at the couple and smiled endearingly. Hope and love. Do you seriously believe what that lunatic had said? Mervyn asked incredulously. Yes, Priscilla replied staunchly. Dear, Sam interjected, surely you don't think something called the Dragon's Breath exists. And if it does, he's going single-handedly into the bandit's lair. And the dead girl he carries around, Joe chuckled. She's not dead, Priscilla stared at him, dagger shooting from her eyes. This proves our point. The world outside has been driven mad by violence and disease and fear. He is a perfect example of that. Be careful that you don't get caught up with his insanity yourself, or you won't be fit to be our leader, Mervyn warned. Petit was next to offer his opinion. Like we initially thought, there is nothing to discuss about the outside. We have our own ways. Dying ways, she commented. You're a village chief in honor of the sacrifice your father made, so do not mock the customs he died upholding, old Sam boomed, trembling with rage. Priscilla was undaunted by Sam's anger and air of self-righteousness. We can't go on sacrificing our people to the Minakins. We can leave. There are lands out there, normal people like us who survived. It's not all murderers and robbers. Relocate the entire village? For what? The mere presence of some barbarian? Petit mocked. I have decided that we will do just that. We will march out of the desert instead of paying our blood tribute to monsters we have not seen. Caution, girl, Mervyn shouted once more. You speak blasphemy with every breath. Calm down, everyone, Sam interfered. He turned to Priscilla with a stern gaze. I'm afraid you are no longer fit to lead us. When has anything I said been taken to heart? She asked bitterly. Doesn't matter. I have made my mind to leave. You lack the courage and fortitude of your father, Sam lamented. Don't you dare bring my father into this. She gripped the old man by the collars. Petit and the others stood up, but Sam held out a hand. It's all right, he said, his stare fixed on Priscilla, daring her. She let go. The pretense had already reached an unbearable level. I promised him a horse and carriage and some fresh supplies. You can't just give those away to a stranger, Joe complained. Old Sam slowly shook his head. You should know the situation. We are in no position to look after others, especially when he gave us nothing of value in return. Priscilla was too tired to argue with these old men. My house and land. I'll trade it for what I have asked. Joe sat forward in his chair, and even old Sam raised a brow at the one-sided deal. Why, she's quite serious, isn't she? Joe cackled. The first to come to my house gets it, she said on her way to the door, then turned into old Sam. Priscilla spat. Now it's officially your village to run. That is how you've always wanted it to be, isn't it? I say that was quite a successful meeting we just had. It was Joe who came to her first. The horse was certainly not the best, but it was a strong steed, and the wagon was furnished with supplies. After all, Joe was in the position to be generous now that he inherited all of her possessions. Priscilla had made the news known that she was leaving, and a firm shudder shook the town. Instead of echoing her cry, the villagers were quick to lambast her for her betrayal. Certainly, a radical change in a place that revered tradition would have such an effect. She had expected it, but it still pained her. These were people she knew and had grown up with. Are you really leaving? She was surprised to see Isaac. What are you doing here? If it's not too much to ask, I would like to leave with you. With me? This was something utterly unexpected. She had known Isaac for a long time and knew him to be someone who enjoyed water as much as he did fine wine. Why would he care? Why would he come to her? Yes, Priscilla. He dropped the large bag he had over his shoulder onto the ground. I even packed. But why? Don't you like it here? Isaac examined the floor, kicking up clouds of dirt. Philip and the others would reassign me. I know it. They never liked me even when you were here. I only wanted to stay because of my mother. The beach, the ocean, they reminded me so much of her. When she was alive, we used to have our walks every day. Now, with you leaving, I won't ever get a chance like that. He looked at her with such earnest, pleading eyes. For the first time that day, she smiled. Well, alright. It would be nice to have an old friend on the journey. You two can come with us. Both Priscilla and Isaac turned in the direction of the voice and saw Ainsley standing at the rear of the wagon. You told me you would get me these things, but not that you would come along. Then it should be a bonus for you, Priscilla answered. 2 bodyguards thrown in. I can't have you two take those risks. None that were imposed on us. We have a right to our own choices. We chose to leave this town, and we chose to go wherever we wish, Priscilla answered sharply. She gave her house for these, Isaac elaborated. Why did you do it? Ainsley asked. I gave my word. Promises still count, don't they? He nodded, a faint smile appearing on the edge of his lips. Thank you. I appreciate it. We should head out while it's still early, Priscilla said as she glanced toward the gray sky. I'll drive, Isaac volunteered and immediately hopped onto the wagon. He held out a hand for Ainsley, but the man with the girl on his back had already gotten on and made his way to the back. Priscilla grabbed Isaac's outstretched hand. Thanks. Isaac smiled. It's nothing. Shall we? Priscilla asked, staring at her house for the last time. She had imagined herself to be more emotional at this moment, but a bitter taste of nostalgia was washed over by a tang of excitement. The outside world held so much promise compared to Terrenton. At the very least, she would not have to live every day subjugated under the village's tradition. Priscilla meant well, but to the people she was a shell of who her father had been. But what he did then was right only for his time. There were no universal answers or truths. Different challenges arose, and the solutions must also evolve to fit them. Did the elders with their years of experience not see this? Or was their experience an impediment to grasping this idea? The horse-drawn wagon made its way through the city, where raucous celebrations were already underway. It wasn't to mark Priscilla's departure, though some of the folks probably took the opportunity to celebrate that anyway. This was for something even more monumental, the annual offering. For 3 days, the village would be immersed in festivities that culminated in an elaborate send-off of the offered, man or woman of any age, to the Minakins. The offered never returned, but in exchange, Terrenton was left in peace. She watched as Isaac steered the carriage past the busy streets of the tiny village. The joyous features of the people's face were genuine, for the offering guaranteed another year of safety, another year of isolation. The family members of the offered were always easy to find. They were the only ones marked by ambivalence, celebrating with wide, grinning mouths and wild, gesticulating limbs, but sad, vacant eyes. To go on behalf of the village was a blessing and a curse, and the offered was the hero and the scapegoat. She could guess at what they were thinking and feeling, for her father had done the same years ago. For the right thing, he had said. Those were the last words he left her. It was a simple yet noble ideal for Priscilla to ruminate and follow. Not until she took his place as village head did she realize how difficult it really was. For one thing, the right thing was ever shifting, and second, the right thing often was many things, like keeping promises, protecting others, standing firm, and sometimes leaving. Would her father condone her action today? She had tried to be a good leader, but ultimately she failed. A leader had to have followers, and she had no one. With the village shrinking away, Priscilla began to think that perhaps her father would approve of her. Sometimes the right thing meant living free from guilt and unburdened by duty. To live for oneself and die for oneself, and if possible, find happiness along the way. It shouldn't be too hard, she thought. I just have to try. If you like what you've heard and don't want to wait until next week, either be a member on Ko-fi and get access to next week's episode today, or read the whole book for free with a Kindle membership. See links below. Until next time.